Sama deki I want to share a story that might be unlike anything you've ever heard when it's kata. It's just about me, Liam, just a ordinary supermarket clerk, and how my life changed when I fell in love with someone the world had long given up on. His name is Joe, a 43-year-old man living on the streets. ये बनता नहीं का थूम बनता आपने decide करा to love everything bind and live by his side. I can say it was the most daring and maybe the most beautiful choice I've ever made. I remember the first time I saw him so clearly. It was a cold night, just like any other, and I was closing up the supermarket. The work was tiring and I always left through the back door, avoiding the hurried faces of customers. I enjoyed those final moments of silence, like the world was taking a breather just for me. But that night, something different happened. As I pushed open the door, there he was, already sitting on the sidewalk, a old blanket draped over said his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the ground. Arming about to him caught my attention right away, but it wasn't pity, it was curiosity. He didn't look as lost or desperate as many of the homeless people I'd seen before. There was something in his eyes that a depth that seemed to hold a story was a one I felt an inexplicable need to hear. Nagul tanahat, I said without thinking much. Hey, basically his eyes, kopattai, they were brown, but saw a depth in them that set me speechless. Yeah, that is. He replied in a raspy voice and almost like he wasn't used to talking to anyone. I hesitated for a few seconds before walking away, but that night, as I headed home, I couldn't get his image out of my head. Who was he? How did he end up there? And why did I feel this uncontrollable urge to know more? Hamare se kirite my routine was the same, but in the back of my mind, I was already anticipating the evening. When it was time to leave, there he was again, sitting in the same spot. This time, I didn't just pass by, I stopped. I grabbed a hot coffee from the convenience store next door and handed it to him. How are you? I said, extending the cup. He looked at me, suspicious at first, but then he took it. Thanks, Mahabkar. He murmured, taking a sip. My name's Joe, he said, breaking the heavy silence between us. Liam, I replied with a smile, or that's how it started. I began visiting him every night after work. At first, our conversations were brief. He didn't seem comfortable talking about himself, but over time, I earned his trust. He told me that he used to have a stable life working as a mechanic and even being married at one point. But after a string of bad events, his divorce, his mom's death, losing his job, he ended up on the streets. I listened, say why a word like this one, it was a piece of a puzzle I was trying to put together. It wasn't just his story that fascinated me, it was the way he spoke with him. With Kebeki, a raw honesty I rarely saw in people around me. The weeks went by, let me something say to change between us. It wasn't just friendship, I started to feel something say more orange se calm, something that scared me but that I couldn't ignore. I felt drawn to Joe in a way I'd never felt for anyone before. It wasn't just physical, it was like he had opened a door inside me I didn't even know existed. One particularly cold night, everything changed. I was sitting beside him on the hard ground of the alley, listening to him talk about how he used to spend summers fishing with his dad. He seemed so lost in the memory that I couldn't help myself. No place my hand over his instinctive gesture be, hey, stop talking. And when he looked in at me, there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Liam. He started that but then stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, almost tangible. You don't have it apati. Anything Anak said would say to ease the tension, but perhaps I could pull away. He leaned forward and kissed me. It was hesitant at first, almost shy, but then it became intense maybe. I could feel all the pain and longing he had been holding back. At that moment, I knew there was no turning back. When our lips parted, I looked at him, trying to process what had just happened. Joe avoided my gaze, or I could tell he was nervous. His hand trembled slightly under mine. I opened my mouth to say something, but he spoke first. Liam, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that, Kashmiki. He pulled his hand back and stared at the ground like he wanted to disappear. Joe, look at me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady and even though my heart was racing. Slowly he raised his eyes and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability mixed with fear. Don't apologize. There's nothing wrong with this. He seemed to relax a little, but there was still a weight between us. Silence settled in, and I knew that somehow that night had changed everything. I went home feeling confused, but one thing was clear. Joe wasn't just someone I wanted to help, he was someone I wanted in my life. In the days that followed, like Joe var sin somri kommissionen morbisarut ki. I still brought him coffee and stayed to talk, but when he avoided mentioning what had happened, and then one night was when as we'd be sat in the same alley down. This Yemi broke the silence in a way that caught me completely off guard. Liam, you don't understand. I'm king, not geek. You? I don't know how to deal with this. I never have. His voice was low, almost a whisper. I spent my whole life running from who I am. I didn't know what Kantadeva. Anna, he came seemed myths are lost, though trapped in a battle within himself that I couldn't reach me Kadyani. But at the same time, there was something so honest about him that it made my chest ache. But I know one thing, I don't want to lose you, and for me, that's enough. Hey, Suki ke saath, I could have a standing to decide if ye could believe me. And then he settled time. It was like a butchan ko salis vantai ke paas aayin. Almost imperceptible, but it was full of meaning. For the first time, I felt like he was starting to let himself feel something come. As the weeks went on, our connection only deepened. Joe started to open up more, sharing stories about his childhood, his fears, and his hopes, no matter how small they were. He came to me when he was younger, he always felt like there was something different about him, but he never had the courage to explore it. Society crushed him, and he ended up bearing that part of himself. I never saw anyone could look at me, or was suicide, he said one night as we were side by side. Then his voice was barely a whisper, but there was a certainty in it that I hadn't heard before in the man. I look at you because I made you the streets ka decide to make you, but the man can usually she araha. That's it, Maman. To he did sanan for brane apne kam. On the end we were experiencing something bigger than ourselves, Meha. It was as if we were piecing together fragments of ourselves that had been broken along the way. But it wasn't always easy. Some nights Joe would completely shut down. He'd sit in silence, lost in his thoughts, and ultimately go to Duke and stay by his side, waiting for him to be ready to talk. Or there are times he would question whether what we were doing was right. He'd tell me I deserve better, someone better, and every time I would tell him the same thing. You're the best thing I've ever found. May state or indi sikars cloak apne par menshi ke be was into my eyes and said did something that changed everything. I love you, Liam, but never so I could say that to anyone, but I love you. My heart almost stopped. Something. But hearing those words was like a bolt of lightning cutting through every cloud. I leaned in and kissed him, not with the hesitation of before, but with the certainty of someone who knew they say were exactly where they were meant to be. And that's when I made the decision that I would change our lives. Joe, I can't keep leaving you here. I can't go home every night and leave you in this cold on this pavement. I want to be with you, and if that means staying here, then I'm all in. He tried to talk me out of it, saying I was being impulsive, that I deserved more, but the truth was, I'd already made up my mind. I quit my job, left my tiny apartment, and started living by his side. At first, it was hard. Life on the streets isn't easy, but I'd never felt so alive. Came a strange sense of belonging. It was odd how the streets, which had felt so hostile at first, started to seem less cold. It was his Mikari. Joe was by my side. Or me, I was learning to see the world from a different perspective. He taught me to appreciate things I'd taken for granted, like a sunny day, an honest conversation, or simply being alive. Passing Amaria, but the harsh realities of our new life were always close. One of the hardest nights we faced was when a group of drunk teenagers confronted us. They laughed and mocked us as if our presence offended their comfortable existence. I was about to say something, but Joe grabbed my arm, Don't, Liam. Vipante is not worth it. They have their world and we have ours. That one night, Kiyasa Besai ko barak hard ground of the alley bang. Huisiki confessed something that broke my heart, Ariya. Yes, something what hurts the most. It's not the cold or the hunger. It's me being treated like you don't matter. Like your existence is a problem. I gripped his hand tightly, feeling my chest tighten. You matter to me, Joe. You're everything to me. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know that. Or dying or putting, I made a decision. We really couldn't keep living like this. Joe deserved more than the streets, more than the scorn of strangers. And then if I truly loved him, I had to find a way out. I started looking for jobs around the city, anything that could help us rebuild our lives. One lucky day, I landed a temporary job at a bakery. The pay wasn't much, but it was a start. When I told Joe, he stayed silent for a moment before pulling me into a tight hug. You didn't have to do this, Liam, but thank you for believing in us. जो भी also may be searching for ways to contribute. कोई से नए पे वो रसने करा सके है. But has managed operation to find work cleaning a small restaurant. This was exhausting, but they were never complained there. Each के आते पे हो सकते every penny we could do or determined to leave the streets behind and build something together at Daga. हमारे during the day coming something beautiful happened. We became a team. We weren't just two men in love, that we were like partners in every sense of the word, Iman Touch. When one of us was tired, the other carried the weight. When one of us lost hope, the other reminded them why we were fighting. After Kabane weekend, we managed to rent a tiny room in a simple building, but it wasn't much, but it was ours. When we stepped into that space for the first time, Joe froze in the doorway, his eyes filling with tears. It's been so long since I've had a place to call home. I took his hand and smiled. Welcome home. Like adjusting to life indoors wasn't easy. Or we still carry the invisible scars of art in our time on the streets, but slowly, what we began to heal. Joe started cooking again, something he loved and said was therapeutic. I watched him as he chopped ingredients, his focus intense, could dop or my heart would swell. He was blooming again. And heck, one night case, some days in the cramped bed, and he turned to me and with that shy smile I loved so much. Liam, you know you saved my life, right? I laughed softly, shaking in my head. I think it's you who saved mine, Joe. I realized it didn't matter where we were or what we faced. Like, as long as we were together, we'd be okay. But our journey didn't stop there. Joe began to dream bigger. He talked about opening a small repair shop, going back to the work he loved before everything fell apart. I wanted nothing more than to see that dream come true, so we started saving every cent we could. It wasn't easy, but the hope of a better future kept us going. Iske saath, one of the most rewarding things about those days was seeing Joe come back to life. The man who once doubted he deserved love was now full of ideas and plans. His confidence grew with each passing day, and so did our bond. We were no longer just surviving, we were building a life. Of course, there were still our challenges. Adjusting to stability after so long and chaos wasn't simple. Some nights Joe would wake up from nightmares reliving moments of his past that haunted him. Other times he'd get quiet, his eyes clouded with doubt. But what if I mess this up, Liam? What if I lose everything again? By the hit couldn't be close kan par muda kahim. Obvious samajh se had already overcome. You weren't not alone this time, Joe. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. And as time is sweating, we find joy in the simplest things. Mornings spent drinking coffee in silence, evenings laughing over meals Joe cooked, and late nights talking about the future. Our little room wasn't much, but it was filled with love, warmth, and a sense of safety we hadn't known in a long time. I'd say one day particularly beautiful moment come one or rainy afternoon hai. We were sitting by the window, watching the drops race down the glass. Joe turned to me and said, Gink, you know, I never thought I'd feel like this again. Like I have a purpose. You too gave me that, Liam. I smiled deep and taking his hand in mine, guide. You always had a purpose, Joe. You just needed someone to remind you. Aanne indai momenatne realize ko apar bidhat ko me. Fabga ki sad Ali Hermi ki shed or a first hesitant kiss to atni room that felt marai like maham kan home than any place I'd ever known. We had built something real. It bahut sant ko perfect, but it was ours. Now, as I write this here, ante saki hi akata help but feel grateful. Ne grateful kul ko the courage it took to follow my heart, for the strength Joe showed me when I needed it most, and for the love that grew between us despite all odds. Life isn't easy, but with Joe by my side, I know we can face anything. Hard if there's this journey has taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every day, no matter how hard it gets. And with Joe, I know I'll always choose love.